God's chosen ones. They did this thinking you were naive. But you showed them who's the boss. Have you ever been ignored because you stayed quiet? Ever been underestimated because you chose peace over proving a point? Have they mistaken your stillness for surrender? You see, silence makes people uncomfortable. They can't read it. They fear it. So they label it weakness, passivity, naivety. But let me tell you a story. 2,000 years ago, inside the chambers of injustice, under torchlit ceilings and blood-stained walls, a man stood accused. Jesus of Nazareth. The crowd shouted, the priests pressed, Pilate questioned, but he said nothing. Matthew 26:63 says, Jesus remained silent. Why? Not because he was afraid, but because he already knew the outcome. They mistook that silence for submission, but in that silence was sovereignty. Now, let's talk about you. You've been through it, haven't you? People running their mouths behind your back, smiling at your face while sharpening knives behind closed doors, and all the while you said nothing. You didn't scream. You didn't post a call out. You didn't fight their noise with noise. And so, they assumed you were weak. They thought your silence was you giving up. But in reality, you were watching, you were listening, and you were waiting. Because those who walk with wisdom don't waste time with noise. They build power in the quiet. Here's what they didn't know. The moment you didn't clap back, you planted the seed of their downfall. Because while they were busy exposing their character, you were mastering your timing. Just like Joseph, who was thrown into a pit and sold by his own brothers. They thought it was over, but he rose in silence to rule over Egypt. Genesis 41:41. And when they came begging, confused by the shift in power, he said nothing at first. That is divine strategy. Let me ask you something. What if your silence wasn't weakness, but a battlefield where your victory was being prepared? What if every quiet moment was God repositioning you? What if your silence was the sound of the enemy walking into their own trap? This is your awakening. You weren't quiet because you had no voice. You were quiet because you had too much vision to waste words on noise. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was surveillance, it was precision, it was power, waiting to be released. And now, chosen one, they're going to see what silence has built, not with words, but with undeniable results. Stay tuned, because the next move will be the one they never saw coming. Every trap they set built your throne. Have you ever felt like every door was closing on you at once? Like no matter how hard you tried, someone was always one step ahead, trying to keep you down? Did it ever feel like you were being punished just for having a dream? They didn't just try to stop you. They orchestrated it. In the shadows, in silence, in whispers behind closed doors, they set traps, hoping you'd fall. They didn't want to break your body, they wanted to break your spirit. And now, let me take you into a story, one that changed everything. The pit that became a palace. Centuries ago, in the ancient land of Canaan, there was a young boy named Joseph. He had visions, he had favor, he had purpose, but worst of all, he had brothers who hated that light in him. One day, while walking toward them in nothing but trust, they threw him into a pit, not because he did wrong, but because he dreamed too boldly. And when the pit wasn't enough, they sold him into slavery. Gone, forgotten, left for dead, but God never forgot. From the pit, Joseph rose in Potiphar's house. When slander struck him again, he was thrown into prison, falsely accused. But even in the prison, the light still moved. Until one day, when Pharaoh had a dream no man could interpret. And Joseph? Yes, the boy they tried to erase, was called up from the dungeon, and in one divine moment, he went from prisoner to ruler, from being thrown down to becoming the one they would kneel before. Genesis 50:20, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Now, let's talk about you. You've been betrayed too, haven't you? Not by enemies, but by people who smiled in your face, people who said they'd stand by you only to be the first to push you off the edge. They planted seeds of doubt in others. They blocked your access, sabotaged opportunities, and watched in silence, hoping to see you collapse. But what they didn't realize was, you weren't breaking. You were building. You see, you didn't just survive what they did. You studied it, you grew through it, you built with it. Their rejection, it taught you how to clap for yourself in the dark. Their lies, they sharpened your discernment. Their silence when you needed support, it forced you to find your own voice. You didn't crumble, you recalibrated. The warning they never saw coming. So, here's the twist that they never anticipated. Every trap they set became a brick in your staircase. Every pitfall became a lesson. Every closed door became fuel. And now, they have to watch you rise. Not because you begged for it, but because destiny cannot be buried forever. You can't bury God's favor, and you can't trap someone who was born to build with bricks they didn't buy. Why they tried to break you, people don't trap what they're not afraid of. They don't scheme against the forgettable. They target the ones who carry light, because they know the light reveals their darkness. But light doesn't die in the pit. It multiplies in pressure. So they laughed at your detour. They didn't know detours create new maps. They tried to discredit you. They didn't know credibility built in silence lasts longer than applause. They withheld support, not realizing it unlocked your independence. And now, the greatest irony, you no longer need their validation. You no longer need their access, because you built something they can't tear down. You didn't just win, you redefined what winning even looks like. The rising they can't stop, so chosen one. When you walk into rooms they try to lock you out of, remember this. You're not standing there in spite of the trap, you're standing there because of it. Because God doesn't just allow pain, He recycles it. He transforms betrayal into building blocks. He turns false accusations into promotions. He turns pits into palaces. And every time they whispered, "It's over," He whispered louder, "Watch this." So no matter what they set up against you, no matter how coordinated the attack seemed, every trap they set was a stepping stone for your throne. Comment 9.99 if you know the trap didn't work. It built you, and now you're stepping into the role you were born to claim. They played checkers, but you controlled the chessboard. Have you ever let someone think they were winning just to see how far they'd go? Ever watched someone so arrogant, so certain of their own cleverness, that they couldn't see you were leading them right where you wanted them? That's not manipulation, that's strategy. That's the difference between people who play to impress and those who move in silence to dominate. They were playing checkers. You were playing chess with God as your strategist. Let me tell you a story, not from fiction, not from folklore, but from the very first war of strategy ever recorded. Genesis chapter 3, the garden game, when deception entered the board. The setting was Eden, perfection, order, divine symmetry. But into this balance slithered a player not interested in truth, but in tactics. Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field. The serpent didn't need brute force. He used suggestion, distortion, and timing. Did God really say? He didn't attack Eve's body. He attacked her discernment. He planted doubt like a virus, masked as a question. That was his move, his checkers, short game, shallow win, immediate satisfaction. But God? God was already playing a long game. He knew that what was corrupted through deception would one day be redeemed through a different tree, on a different hill, by a man who would not fall for temptation but conquer it. The serpent won a move, but God had already written the checkmate. Now, back to you and your opposite. They thought you were operating on their level. Quick wins, emotional outbursts, reactive thinking. They didn't realize you weren't playing their game, you were building the board. While they were scrambling to make noise, you were mastering silence. They planned tactics, you crafted strategy. Do you know why this confuses people? Because we live in a world addicted to instant wins. People want applause before foundation. They want clout before clarity. But you saw 5 moves ahead. You didn't react. You anticipated, and like a true chess master, you allowed them to believe they were ahead, so they would reveal their entire hand. They smiled while they schemed. But they never saw you studying patterns. They never noticed you tracking timing, observing habits, calculating every outcome in silence. Your silence wasn't stillness. It was positioning. Let me ask you this. What's more dangerous? A lion that roars at every threat, or the one who waits in stillness until the strike is absolute? You didn't shout. You didn't argue. You didn't defend every rumor. Because while they were building arguments, you were building altars. You were consulting a higher wisdom. And here's the truth. Every reckless move they made was positioning your elevation. Every trap they celebrated was data for your breakthrough. So now the roles have reversed. They're out of moves, and you haven't even revealed your queen. Biblical reflection. Joseph's chess match. Let's go deeper. You remember Joseph. His brothers played checkers, sell him. Get rid of the dreamer, problem solved. They were playing for survival. Joseph? He was playing for legacy. Years later, when famine struck, and the same brothers stood before him, starving, broken, they didn't even recognize the one they buried. Genesis 41:41. I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. He didn't just win, he redefined the playing field. And when they begged for mercy, he didn't say checkmate. He said, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Genesis 50:20. That's what happens when the anointed play the long game. Modern strategy. How you moved in silence. Let me break this down plainly. They tried to drag your name. They tried to gaslight you, trap you, bait you into foolish reactions, but you didn't flinch. You were building, quietly, strategically, and now your results are undeniable. They have gossip, you have gravity, they have stories, you have substance. And now they're asking, how did this happen? How were they so far ahead? But they'll never understand. Because they were chasing claps, and you were chasing calling, exception. You wrote the rule. This was never about playing harder, it was about playing smarter. You didn't just play the game better, you outgrew it, you outclassed it, you outlived it. You weren't just playing chess, you were designing the board, writing the rules, deciding who gets to play, and now the players are scrambling, because the game they thought they mastered was never theirs to begin with. The game belongs to you now. You hear me, chosen one. Let them keep playing checkers. Let them keep chasing fast wins, loud noise, temporary applause. You'll keep building empires in silence. You'll keep choosing foresight over force. You'll keep letting them underestimate you. Because that's your camouflage. Because by the time they realize what's happening, you'll already be 10 moves ahead, and the crown will already be resting where it belongs. You weren't just playing chess. You were commanding kingdoms. And now, you don't just move pieces. You move destinies. Betrayal didn't break you. It set you free. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the loss. It's realizing the person you trusted was never really with you to begin with. Have you ever sat in silence after being betrayed, wondering how they could smile in your face and stab you in the back? Ever questioned your own worth because someone you would have died for walked away like you meant nothing? Ever held back tears, pretending you were fine, just so no one would see you fall apart? Yeah, you felt it. And let me tell you, so did one of the most powerful men in Scripture. Let's go back to the moment Peter broke. The bonfire, the denial, the eyes of Jesus. Luke 22, verses 52, verses 62. It was cold, the night air in Jerusalem wrapped around the shadows of a corrupt trial. Jesus had just been arrested, dragged from Gethsemane into the hands of those who feared his truth. And Peter, the one who swore he would never abandon him, was following, but from a distance. He stood by the fire, warming his hands in the dark. And then came the first whisper. "Aren't you one of his disciples?" "No," Peter said quickly. "I don't know him." "Strike one," another voice joined in, louder this time. "Yes, you were with him." Peter clenched his jaw. "No, I was not." Strike two. Then came the third, the final, the fatal. Someone called out, "Surely you're one of them. Your accent gives you away." And in frustration, fear and pride, Peter snapped. Luke 22, 6-60. "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and he went outside and wept bitterly. What betrayal really reveals. Peter didn't hate Jesus. He loved him. But fear twisted his loyalty. And that's the thing about betrayal. It's not always rooted in hate. Sometimes it's weakness. Sometimes it's insecurity, but every time it's revelation. Betrayal doesn't destroy truth, it exposes it. It shows you who's real, it shows you who's temporary. It reveals the gap between what you believed about someone and who they actually are. Now, let's talk about you. They betrayed you too, didn't they? Not just strangers, but people you prayed with, people you sacrificed for, people who said they'd always be there until the storm came. And when life tested your loyalty, you stood by them. But when it tested theirs, they ran, they gossiped, they watched you fall and blamed you for bleeding. Let me ask you, did it break you or did it wake you up? Because sometimes pain is the scalpel that God uses to cut out the cancer of counterfeit connections. And maybe, just maybe, you weren't losing people, you were losing the illusion of who they were the moment it shifted. Your roster crow, just like Peter's moment of realization, maybe you had yours too. That one conversation, that look in their eyes, that message they never answered, the moment you finally saw it clearly. They were never meant to go where God is taking you. Because before promotion comes pruning, before elevation comes separation, and before God seats you at the table, He clears out every Judas hiding in the crowd, the warning in the pain. Here's what you need to understand, chosen one. The betrayal didn't come to break you. It came to break the chains you didn't know you were still carrying. The fear of being alone, the craving for their approval, the addiction to their loyalty, gone. Now you move different. Now you see sharper. Now you choose discernment over dependency. Because sometimes the knife in your back cuts the cord that was holding you down, the beauty in the breaking. And you know what's wild? After Peter betrayed Jesus, Jesus still restored him. He didn't scream, he didn't punish, he waited. And when the time was right, he said, "Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep." John 21:15. Grace. Because betrayal doesn't cancel purpose. So, if you've been betrayed, don't let it make you bitter. Let it make you better. Because what hurt you also healed you. What cut you also cleared you. And what left you also launched you. The final word. Your freedom was disguised as their exit. So let me leave you with this. They thought walking away from you was a win, but all they did was walk you into a level of clarity they could never follow you into. They thought they broke you, but they really unlocked you. They thought they were punishing you, but they actually positioned you. They thought they left you behind, but they were releasing you to go further. So no, the betrayal didn't kill you. It unleashed you. It purified you. It gave you back to yourself. And now, you don't just have peace, you have freedom. Tammy waited for a reaction, but you chose class. Have you ever had someone bait you, push your buttons, just to watch you lose control? Have they whispered behind your back, thrown shade in public, or tried to embarrass you because they were hoping you'd explode and prove them right? They weren't fighting your actions, they were provoking your response. But you didn't take the bait. Why? Because you weren't built to perform for petty people. You were called to build something greater. The story. Nehemiah's silent stand. Let me take you to the ancient walls of Jerusalem. The city had been broken, burned, humiliated. But a man named Nehemiah, driven by calling, not comfort, took on the task of rebuilding it. He wasn't a builder by trade. He wasn't a king. He was a cupbearer. But when you carry God's vision, it doesn't matter what's on your resume. As Nehemiah led the rebuilding, his enemies came crawling out. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, 3 men. All distractions. They didn't confront Nehemiah with swords. They used invitations, subtle manipulation. They sent message after message. Come down, talk to us, meet us in the valley of Ono. But Nehemiah didn't flinch. Nehemiah 6:3. I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. He didn't explain himself. He didn't defend his reputation. He didn't waste breath on slander. He just kept building. You lived it too. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you been pulled into a conversation that was never meant to elevate you, but expose you? How many times have people tried to interrupt your growth with fake concern, petty drama, or empty meetings meant to stall your momentum? You were mid-mission, and they tried to pull you down. Maybe they couldn't match your vision, so they tried to shrink your focus. Maybe they couldn't stand your peace, so they threw chaos just to watch you crack. But you didn't crack. You didn't come down. And that's when they got confused. The psychology of provocation. People who thrive on chaos feel powerless in front of calm. They mistake peace for passivity. They mistake focus for arrogance. And they think, if I can just get them to flinch, just once, I can prove they're not who they say they are. But when you refuse to respond, you strip them of their power. That's silence. That's power in its purest form. They talk, you build. They gossip, you grind. They provoke, you rise. And while they waste time crafting conflict, you craft legacy. This isn't just a distraction, it's a trap. Here's what you've got to understand, Chosen One. Distraction is warfare in disguise. Not every invitation deserves a reply. Not every insult needs a defense. Because when your enemies can't destroy your purpose, they'll try to destroy your focus. They'll pull you into arguments just to keep you from finishing your assignment. But what they don't know is, you've mastered the art of elevation through discipline. And discipline is the language of the divine. Nehemiah desired your strategy. Back to Nehemiah. His enemies didn't give up after one try. They came 4 times. Each time, same request, same trap, same bait. And every time, Nehemiah said, I will not come down. Why? Because he understood this one truth. What I'm building is too sacred to be stopped by the shallow. Nehemiah wasn't just stacking bricks. He was restoring identity, dignity, and divine order. And you're not just chasing goals. You're rebuilding trust, reclaiming peace, rewriting the narrative. How to know you're growing. If you've been calm in the middle of insult, if you've walked away from a fight you could have easily won, if you've stayed silent while they twisted your name, that's not weakness, that's transformation. You're no longer triggered by what used to rattle you. You don't need to clap back because you already leveled up. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to finish the wall. The final declaration. You chose elevation over ego. So here it is. They waited for your reaction. They studied your silence like a riddle they couldn't solve. They expected you to break, to snap, to crumble under pressure, but you didn't, because you knew when you lower yourself to argue with fools, you become a character in a drama they wrote. But when you stay focused, you remain the author of your own destiny. You didn't come down to respond. You stayed above to complete the work. And now, they're left in the valley of distraction while you finish what they never believed you'd begin. You didn't lower yourself to respond. You elevated yourself through focus. And that's why you're unstoppable. Kindness for weakness. But it was a refined weapon. How many times have you been punished for having a good heart? How often has your kindness been mistaken for ignorance? And how long have they been getting away with it simply because you chose not to clap back? They thought your compassion made you weak. They thought your forgiveness meant they could take more. But what they didn't understand is this. Kindness isn't a flaw. It's a weapon, wielded by those strong enough to hold back when they could have destroyed everything. The story, Moses, the misunderstood leader. Let me take you into the desert, where Moses, once a prince of Egypt, now a servant of God, led a nation out of slavery only to be betrayed by the very people he saved. He didn't scream, he didn't throw his staff, he didn't strike back when they doubted him, questioned his leadership, or disrespected his calling. The Bible says, "Now Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth." Numbers 12:3. Meek, not silent, not soft, not spineless. Meekness is power under control. And Moses carried oceans of it. But his people saw patience and assumed passivity. They saw kindness and assumed compliance. They saw restraint and thought he wouldn't respond. They didn't know they weren't facing a pushover. They were facing a man with God's authority on his breath and thunder in his silence. The modern version? You lived it. Let's be real. You've held back so many times it hurt. You've given grace to people who didn't deserve a whisper of your energy. You've swallowed insults, forgave betrayals, and helped those who would have never helped you. You gave them chance, and they kept collecting your kindness like it was currency they were entitled to. But there's a moment, and I believe you're standing in it right now, where the kindness stops being a gift and becomes a boundary. Kindness isn't blindness. Here's the truth. Forgiveness isn't forgetfulness. Compassion isn't confusion. And mercy does not equal access. Some people need to learn the hard way that the person they took for granted was the only one holding the door open. Because kindness, without discernment, becomes self-destruction. It's not noble to let someone drain your soul just because you have the capacity to care. Scripture fulfilled through fire. When Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, mocked his authority, questioned his marriage, God didn't let it slide. In Numbers 12, God called them out directly, saying, "Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" And when he was done, Miriam was struck with leprosy. Why? Because there's a difference between meekness and being messed with. God defends those who carry quiet power, and when you move in love, not weakness, He'll step in before you have to raise your voice. It's time to withdraw what's been abused. Let me ask you plainly, who in your life has grown entitled to your kindness? Who's been feeding on your forgiveness like it's a free buffet? And more importantly, why are you still letting them? There comes a point when being kind to the wrong people is actually cruel to yourself. You are not obligated to stay soft for those who keep cutting you. You are not commanded to keep blessing people who mock the blessing. Jesus told us to turn the other cheek, but he never told us to keep handing them the blade. So this is your moment, chosen one. Withdraw your kindness from those who misuse it. Reclaim your compassion and give it to people who see its worth. Why they test your goodness. Here's what you've got to understand. People who lack internal light seek control through exploitation. They push boundaries not because they're strong, but because they assume you're too kind to push back. They test your grace like it's elastic, but even elastic snaps when it's stretched too far. You're not just nice, you're dangerously kind. You have a superpower. It's not your anger, it's not your intellect, it's your ability to remain kind in a cruel world and still know exactly when to draw the line. You've been tested, used, dismissed, but you haven't become bitter, you've become precise. And now, your kindness has teeth, your patience has limits, your silence has strategy. You're not nice, you're dangerously compassionate. That's a different breed. You took back the power, so here's the truth they'll never see coming. They didn't walk away from you. You withdrew the very kindness that kept them afloat. You chose peace over performance, discernment over dysfunction, elevation over explanation, and now they don't have access. Not because you changed, but because you finally recognized your kindness is sacred. You let them think they were winning, but they were just digging their own grave. Have you ever been underestimated so badly it became the greatest advantage of your life? Have you ever watched someone get so high on their schemes they didn't even see the fall coming? And have you ever stayed silent, not because you were scared, but because you knew what was coming? Let me tell you something most people don't realize. Sometimes the most ruthless justice is the one that needs no confrontation, because some enemies don't need to be defeated. They just need to keep talking until the floor caves in beneath them, the pit they didn't know they were digging. Psalm 7:15 says it plainly. He who digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit he has made. Not might fall, will. And oh, how confidently they dug, with every whisper behind your back, with every trap disguised as a smile, with every fake opportunity meant to stall your destiny. They thought they were winning, they laughed, they plotted, They boasted. They saw your silence and misread it as surrender. But what they couldn't see was that while they were digging pits for you, they were building the architecture of their own downfall. Modern-day betrayal. Maybe you've seen it in your own life, at work, in your family, among friends you thought were forever. They created a scenario, a manipulation, a lie, a carefully rehearsed mistake, because they thought you'd never see it coming. But you did, and you let it play out. Why? Because you knew something they didn't. Sometimes you don't need to expose people, you just need to give them enough space to expose themselves. The trap of self-righteous aromas. Here's what pride does. It blinds, it intoxicates, it convinces people they're winning, even as they walk straight into destruction. They become so obsessed with your downfall, they forget to watch their own footing. And because they think they're always one step ahead, they never realize they've been walking in circles around a pit they dug for you, the same pit you never fell into, because you were never where they assumed you'd be. You saw it coming. Let's be clear, you weren't lucky, you were strategic. You watched, you studied, you gave them time to reveal their real face. And when they did, you didn't yell, you didn't chase, you didn't stoop to their level. You just stepped back and let gravity do what pride always forgets: bring the arrogant crashing down. The moment they slipped. Do you remember the exact moment when the phone calls stopped, when the fake smiles faded, when the masks slipped, when their plan, crafted so carefully, imploded under its own weight? You didn't fight them. You didn't scream, "I told you so," because you didn't need to. You won by watching their illusion collapse, without ever lifting a hand. Scripture confirmed, falling into their own pit. Psalm 7:15 isn't just poetry, it's prophecy. Those who scheme against the innocent, those who sow lies, those who build with manipulation, always fall into their own strategy. Why? Because what you build out of pride can't hold the weight of truth, and truth always wins. Yellow caterpillar. May I help you, sir? So here's the real question for you now. Are you still holding on to the desire to confront them, or are you ready to let them collapse under their own design? Because confrontation is tempting. We want them to know what they did. We want to be seen, heard, vindicated. But what if the most divine form of vindication is the sound of silence as they fall into the pit they dug for you? The warning: don't climb into their mess. Let this be your caution. Don't climb into the pit trying to rescue someone who pushed you toward it. Don't lose your position by proving a point. Don't give them the satisfaction of dragging you into chaos. Because they're not falling because of you, they're falling because of their choices. And it's not your job to stop them. It's your job to keep walking forward. Victory through restraint. Let's bring this home. You didn't win because you outplayed them. You didn't win because you proved them wrong. You won because you trusted the process. You let their own ego destroy the empire they tried to build against you. You let time and truth be your allies, and you stayed quiet long enough to hear the sound of the trap spring shut. The grave they dug became your plan, and now? They're still confused, still asking what happened, still pretending like nothing went wrong, but deep down, they know. They didn't just lose you, they buried themselves. And you didn't rise from battle, you rose from the ashes of their collapse. You didn't need to fight, you let the grave they dug become your elevation. They talked about you, but your name holds too much weight to shake. How do you survive when your name is dragged through the dirt? How do you keep going when whispers become louder than truth? And what do? When people talk like they know you, but couldn't even spell your character? Let me give you the truth they won't say out loud. Reputation isn't built in gossip, it's carved in granite. And yours was built to outlast every lie. The moment they came for you, let's be honest, there came a season in your life when they didn't fight you with weapons. They fought you with whispers. They didn't come for your body. They came for your name. They didn't need facts. They just needed enough people willing to believe without question. Suddenly, you became the villain in stories you never lived, the punchline in jokes you never heard, the shadow they pointed to when they couldn't explain their own failures. And you stood there, quiet. Not because you were weak, but because you knew something they didn't. You knew the weight of your name couldn't be carried by shallow mouths. Nehemiah, silent. Let's go back to Nehemiah. He wasn't building just walls. He was rebuilding identity, dignity, and strength for a nation torn down. But what did his enemies do when they saw him rising? They wrote letters, anonymous threats, public lies, character assassinations. One of those letters came in Nehemiah 6:5-9. It was unsealed, public, a broadcast of lies disguised as concern. They said, "It's being reported you're plotting rebellion. You're building this wall to crown yourself king. People are talking." But what did Nehemiah say? "I am carrying on a great project and cannot come down." He didn't beg to be understood. He didn't argue. He did not come down, because he knew if you spend all your time answering lies, you'll never finish building truth. The mistake they made. They thought if they could stir enough rumors, you would stop, that the noise would break your focus, that the isolation would crush your spirit, that the doubt would make you question your mission. But they didn't understand. You weren't driven by opinion. You were called by purpose, and a calling like yours doesn't get cancelled by controversy. The power of receptors. Let me ask you this. When they lied on your name, did it make you work harder or fall apart? Did you collapse under the gossip or build deeper into your purpose? Because that's when the shift happened. While they were still talking, you were still creating, still building, still standing. Because rumors are cheap, but consistency costs. They had speculation, you had sacrifice. They had imagination, you had execution. They had rumors, but you had receipts. Gossip's true motivation. Let me go deeper. People don't gossip because of who you are. They gossip because of who they're not. Your growth exposed their stagnancy. Your clarity threatened their chaos. Your presence reminded them of everything they hadn't yet become. Powerful, and the only way to feel powerful was to cut you down with words they couldn't prove. But there's something they never factored in. You weren't building popularity, you were building legacy. The wall is still standing. Imagine this. They laughed at the beginning, mocked you in the middle, but now they can't deny what you've built. Because while they were sharing gossip, you were setting foundations. And when the dust settled, the rumors faded, the people who believed them disappeared. But your work, your fruit, your name, it stood taller than ever. Nehemiah's wall was finished, and no lie could undo that. Stop defending, keep building. So let me speak directly to you. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop defending your light to those addicted to the dark. Stop waiting for gossip to die down. Rise above it. You don't need to run from rumor. You just need to stand firm in evidence. You didn't survive the storm to prove them wrong. You survived to prove yourself right. The legacy of your name. Your name isn't just a sound. It's a legacy, a symbol, a weight, built on nights no one saw, built on wounds that didn't bleed in public, built on prayers, silence, and the kind of self-control gossipers will never understand. So when they speak, let them speak. They're only giving you free marketing. And when it's all said and done, they had stories, you had substance. They had gossip, You had God. They had noise. You had a name. Ballet thought they were the main character, but you were writing the script. Have you ever felt like people tried to hijack your story? Have you watched them speak as if your downfall was their victory? Have you seen people try to steal the spotlight in a story they were never meant to lead? Chosen one, listen carefully. They thought they were the lead role in your life, but they were just hired help in your divine production. You were never the background. You were always the writer. The illusion of control. You've been through betrayal, through isolation, through silence that felt like abandonment. And through it all, people thought they were pulling the strings. They whispered in back rooms. They plotted behind closed doors. They tried to cast you out, not realizing you were the one casting roles all along. They underestimated you because you didn't interrupt their scene. But that's the thing about directors, chosen one. We don't perform. We position. Joseph's unseen pen. Look at Joseph. Sold, exiled, forgotten by the very brothers who shared his blood. They threw him in a pit and said, let's see what becomes of his dream. But decades later, when famine struck and their survival hung by a thread, they found themselves face to face with the one they cast out of the story. And he said to them, in Genesis 45:4-8, do not be distressed. You sold me, yes, but it was God who sent me ahead to preserve life. Let that settle for a moment. They sold him, but God sent him. They thought they were writing him off, but Joseph was stepping into the next chapter of his calling. They needed to feel important. Why do people work so hard to control your narrative? Because they don't trust their own, because your growth exposes their stagnation, because your silence makes them scream louder just to be heard. So they paint you as unstable, as dramatic, as irrelevant. But here's what they forgot, chosen one. The villain never gets the final scene, and the supporting cast doesn't get the mic. You were directing the whole time. While they rehearsed lines in rooms you didn't enter, you were rewriting the entire script. While they focused on short-term applause, you were building generational impact. They were chasing attention. You were building legacy. And when the curtain finally rose, their performance fell flat. Because you didn't need their approval, you had divine direction. The power shift. Chosen one. Here's the plot twist they never saw coming. You weren't reacting, you were preparing. You weren't confused, you were calculating. And now, they're confused watching a story unfold that they thought they controlled. But this was never their story, it was God's. And God chose you to lead it. They were extras. You were the architect. They were speaking lines. You were writing outcomes. They tried to erase you from your own script, but ended up giving you the perfect plot twist. Who really had the power? Let me ask you something. Who really held the power? The ones who gossiped, or the one who kept showing up? Who truly mattered? The ones who left, or the one who never gave up? Chosen one, never confuse noise for narrative. And never confuse attention for authority. They mistook your calm for confusion, but you were focused. They mistook your retreat for defeat, but you were rewriting the rules. Name your role, chosen one. This is your story. And you get to decide who stays in it. You get to choose who has access to your next chapter. No more shrinking to fit their version of you. No more handing over the pen to people who never saw your vision. Let them play their parts, but understand, you are the one chosen to write the ending. You are the one chosen to lead the arc. You are the one chosen to break the script that kept your family bound for generations. Chosen one, this is your time. Final declaration. They thought they were the main character, but they were never the story. They were the test, you were the testimony. They were the trigger, you were the transformation. And now, you've stepped into full authorship. They were just extras. You were always the author. Drop E in the comments if you know you're the one holding the pen now. Declare it out loud. I write the script. I choose the cast. I own the outcome. Because chosen one, they never had the power. You just let them think they did. They tried to steal the spotlight, not knowing you were the source of the light. Have you ever watched someone try to take credit for your glow? Have you seen them copy your words, your walk, your worth, like shadows trying to impersonate the sun? Have you felt the sting of watching them shine with a light that wasn't even theirs to begin with? Chosen one, this message is for you. They tried to steal the spotlight, but they forgot. You are the light source. They mistake your essence for a reflection. In a world obsessed with image, many chase light the way moths chase fire, desperate, frantic, and blind to the truth. They see you walk into a room and the atmosphere shifts. They feel your presence and mistake it for performance. They try to imitate your essence, thinking it's just charisma or confidence, but what they don't realize is this: you don't project light, you are light. And that's something no imitation can replicate. Their battery-pound pipe, you were heaven sent. They flicker, you radiate, a light that darkness couldn't touch. Let's go deeper. John 1:5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That verse is not just about Jesus. It's about what he placed inside of you. When he called you, chosen one, he didn't hand you a flashlight. He lit a flame within you, one the world didn't give, and one the world can't extinguish. The darkness around you tried to swallow you, silence you, but you kept shining. Why? Because the light wasn't borrowed, it was built in. The psychology of insecure illusion. Why do people try to dim others? Because they believe light is scarce. They think for them to shine you must fade. So they throw shade, hoping it sticks. They gossip in corners, they mimic your movements, they manufacture moments to draw attention their way. But here's what they always forget. They're light bulbs. You're the sun. And bulbs don't outshine stars, unmatched, untouchable. Let me take you into a scene they never understood. They thought standing near you would make them seen, but the closer they got, the more obvious it became. You weren't reflecting anything, you were igniting everything. They started comparing themselves, measuring brightness, counting applause. But you were too busy lighting the path for others to walk through. Because light isn't loud, it just is. The dangers of stolen light. Let me ask you this. How many people tried to drain your radiance to power their relevance? How many used your kindness as a mirror just to reflect something they never had? Chosen one, here's the truth no one told you loud enough. Your glow is sacred. Your essence is holy. Your presence isn't decoration, it's direction. You don't shine to impress, you shine to illuminate. So when they tried to outshine you, they weren't challenging your light, they were exposing their darkness. Jesus, the true light, even Jesus, the light of the world, was mocked, misquoted, and misunderstood. They said he had a demon, they called him a blasphemer, they tried to extinguish him on a cross, not realizing they were fueling the resurrection. John 1 says, he was the true light and the world did not recognize him. Why? Because borrowed brilliance always fears the original. Shining is part of the match, not your defect. So, chosen one, stop shrinking, stop doubting, stop apologizing for being too bright in rooms that prefer dimness. You weren't made to blend, you were built to blaze. And the world's insecurity about your intensity is not your burden to carry. They tried to steal your shine, but your light comes from the throne of heaven, not their approval. They had gossip, you had glory. They whispered, they plotted, they mocked, but the fruit speaks. You didn't need to defend your light, because your results were your reflection. Let them talk. They had opinions, you had evidence. They had ego, you had essence. Chosen one, they were light bulbs, you were the sun, and suns don't compete with lamps. You don't need validation, you don't need spotlight, because you are the source. And now, you don't shine to compare. You shine because it's your nature, your design, your divine assignment. Let them chase light, you generate it. Comment, I am the light source if you know who you are. Let this be your declaration. I don't borrow brilliance, I was born with it. And, chosen one, always remember, they tried to steal a flame, but they came too close to fire. You didn't tear them down, you rose above them. Have you ever been tempted to prove a point with fire? Have you stood at the edge of confrontation, holding the power to retaliate, and chosen to walk away instead? And did they call that weakness, while not realizing it was divine restraint? Chosen one, hear me clearly today. They wanted you to fight, but you chose to rise. They hoped you'd retaliate. Instead, you outgrew the battlefield. Let's walk into a cave. Dark, still, heavy with tension. David is hiding. Saul, the very man who's hunted him like prey, enters that cave, alone, vulnerable, unaware. This is the moment. The tables have turned. David holds the sword. He could end it all. But what does he do? He cuts a corner of Saul's robe, not his life, because sometimes mercy speaks louder than muscle. Sometimes not taking the shot is the boldest shot of all. David didn't spare Saul because he feared him. He spared him because he feared God. That's what they never understood about you. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was sacred. You see, immature minds crave noise. They think strength is proven through reaction. They want the clapback, the explosion, the vengeance. But what they didn't know is, stillness is not stagnation, it's strategy. It's spiritual warfare. When you chose not to respond, not to explain, not to stoop, you didn't lower yourself, you elevated yourself. You became the altitude. Let me ask you something deep. How many battles have you been baited into just to prove you're not weak? How many moments did you hold your tongue while they threw stones, believing silence meant surrender? They don't know that silence is holy ground. They don't know that stillness can suffocate the schemes of the enemy, because while they were plotting in chaos, you were rising in clarity. David could have ended Saul, you could have ended them, but you didn't. Because you weren't called to compete with noise, you were anointed to command atmospheres. The illusion of victory. There's something they still don't understand. They think they won because you didn't respond. But what they fail to realize is, you didn't stay quiet because you were afraid to fight. You stayed quiet because the war was beneath you. That's the mystery of elevation. It looks like withdrawal, but it's actually ascension. My father-in-law went downhill for a second. Then Chrisite turned to them. Your inner child looked at them. Chosen one, have you ever outgrown someone so silently that by the time they noticed, they couldn't even reach where you'd gone? That's what happened. Practiced it. You resurrected. Samuel 24 shows us something rare. When David steps out of the cave and calls Saul, my lord the king, he proves that royalty isn't in the title, it's in the temperament. He says, I will not stretch out my hand against my lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. He chooses reverence. Chosen one, that's you. You're not here to fight every accusation. You're not here to clap back at every shadow. You're here to rise. Because royalty doesn't fight like commoners, it simply ascends where they can't follow. The psychology of power. They were obsessed with pulling you into their drama. They needed you to stoop, to scream, to swing. Why? Because your silence shattered their illusion of control. You held the real power, not in how loud you were, but in how unshakable you stayed, the altitude of purpose. Let this sink into your bones. You didn't defeat them by destroying them. You defeated them by becoming unreachable. You stopped explaining. You stopped attending their circus. And you started building something so high they couldn't tear it down. Because they couldn't even reach the first step. They think you're still down there fighting for space, but you've already built a new level, and they're not invited. Chosen one, remember this. You didn't destroy them. You disciplined yourself. You didn't cancel them. You conquered within. You didn't get revenge. You got results. You're not on their level. You're not in their war. Because you've grown past the need to be right and stepped fully into being aligned. You didn't lower them, you lifted yourself. And that is how real power moves. Comment, I chose elevation over revenge below, if this is your confirmation. Let the world know. You're not reactive, you're royally strategic. You didn't just win, you redefined what winning looks like. What if your success isn't meant to fit in? What if the reason they never recognized you is because you were building something that never existed before? What if you weren't called to meet the standard, but to become it? Chosen one, listen closely. You were never meant to compete in their system. You were anointed to replace it, the miracle that defined a new model. Let's go back to a moment on a quiet hillside. Thousands are hungry. There is no food, no plan, no budget, just 5 loaves and 2 fish. The disciples panic, the crowd murmurs. But Jesus doesn't look for approval. He doesn't beg for recognition. He lifts his eyes and rewrites reality. He multiplies lack into abundance. That's not just a miracle, that's a new blueprint. They measured success by systems. You build something spiritual. They thought winning was about titles, about applause, about fitting into an existing mold. You didn't do that. You weren't chasing their trophies. You were too busy forging your own legacy. While they were collecting medals, you were performing the miraculous. That's why they didn't see it coming. Your elevation wasn't public at first, because it wasn't for them. It was sacred, private, powerful. It was designed to shift the atmosphere, not to impress spectators. The system called Hold and Hold You. Chosen one, have you ever felt like your vision didn't fit anywhere? Like no stage, no platform, no title could contain what's inside you? That's not delusion. That's divine disruption. You were never meant to win their game. You were created to end it. They wanted you to fight for their crown, but God gave you blueprints for a kingdom. They couldn't handle your purpose because it didn't come with permission slips. It came with heaven's assignment. You don't echo success, you define it. You didn't climb their mountain, you built your own. Let this strike your soul. Your success doesn't look like theirs, because yours came through storms they couldn't survive. They reached the top of a hill someone else paved. You carved your path through stone. They have positions. You have authority. They have influence. You have impact. They have recognition. You have revelation. And the world, it can't ignore you anymore. The miracle in the multitude. Jesus didn't feed the 5,000 to impress anyone. He did it to prove that limitations are illusions when purpose is present. You've been doing the same thing, making much out of little, turning pain into purpose, turning rejection into revelation, multiplying the impossible until it becomes your norm. You didn't wait to be accepted. You activated what they couldn't understand. Your victory was never about being seen. It was about being sent. Let me ask you something personal. How many times did they dismiss you because you didn't look like the winner they expected? How often did they overlook your process, not realizing your process was holy ground? Let them keep their stages. Let them hold their spotlights. You're the source now, because you didn't come to chase recognition. You came to reconstruct reality. Say it with me, chosen one. This is your confirmation. You didn't just win. You changed the definition of winning. You didn't climb to the top of their mountain. You built a summit so high, they'll spend their lives trying to understand how you got there. And you didn't need applause to get here. You just needed obedience. They measured success by the spotlight, but your light wasn't given. It was born. You don't shine to compete. You shine because it's who you are. This isn't the end, chosen one. It's the origin story of a new era. Comment, "I am the blueprint," if this hit your soul. And remember, your rise is not to match the world. It's to redefine it. Have you ever felt like everything you've been through was preparing you for something you couldn't see yet? Have you ever wondered why the battles were so intense? The silence so loud, the betrayals so personal? What if it wasn't to break you, but to build you into who you were born to become? Chosen one, this wasn't a coincidence. This was a divine setup. Every tear, every test, every quiet night where you doubted your worth, it was refining fire. God wasn't punishing you, He was positioning you. And now, you're not who you were. You're not begging for a seat at their table. You're building a throne they can't ignore. Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn." This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. That's your heritage. That's your spiritual DNA, not just to survive, but to lead, not just to be chosen, but to awaken others. So if something stirred in your soul today, if you feel it in your chest, that this isn't the end of your story, but the beginning of your rise, comment 999 right now. Let heaven and earth witness. You are stepping boldly into your destiny. And never forget, you didn't just make it through the fire, you became the flame. The world hasn't seen your final form, because chosen one, your journey is only just beginning.